I'm photographer David duChemin, and this is Vision is Better, a sometimes weekly podcast about the craft and art of photography. Welcome here. Hey, welcome to another episode of Vision is Better. This is episode 28, and if you're watching this in the first couple weeks of January 2016, I'm on assignment in Lesotho, but I thought I would give you a bit of I'd give you a little something while I was gone. At the very beginning of January, we released a product that I'm calling After the Camera. It's a very simplified approach to what I call vision-driven editing and post-production, vision-driven workflow. And it's kind of, as many of you know, I'm not a geek. I use the geek stuff to service my vision. And for many of you that are in my audience, that kind of approach resonates with you. You'd much rather spend time out somewhere amazing with your camera than sitting in front of your computer, but nevertheless, you need to get the editing done, you need to do the post-production, and you're looking for an approach that is a little bit more simplified than some of the other resources out there are teaching you. So I've created my resource, After the Camera, and for this episode of Vision is Better, we're just going to play episode 13. After the Camera is a 20-episode video series, and this is episode 13 from that series. If it appeals to you, if it looks like something you'd like to learn more about, you can go to craftandvision.com. I'll put the link in the notes for this episode. And if you're still watching this in the first couple of weeks of January, there's a sale on. We've left the product on sale, and it includes, so it's 20 episodes of After the Camera. It includes my 36 Lightroom Develop presets as part of the bundle. And again, if you're watching it the first couple of weeks of January, it's $30 instead of the regular $40. Hope it's useful to you. Hope you'll avail yourself of it. And even if not, this episode's free. We'll see you later. Remember, gear is good, but vision's better. Take care. This is episode 13 of After the Camera. Hey, welcome back. This is, we're going to go back to the Spirit Bears. And I want to do a black and white conversion with you because there are things about the black and white tools in Lightroom that I have not shown you, and they have or can have a dramatic effect on the way that we deal with, especially with drawing the eye, especially with the reassignment of visual mass and the way we read and experience an image. So I'll probably do a couple of black and white images with you, this being the first of them. So I'm going to walk through this fairly quickly, and because I've shown you some of the tools already, I'm not going to explain a lot. And what I'm doing here is really I'm going back to a virtual copy, and I'm kind of doing this a little bit ad hoc. So if you've already seen this image, the version that I come up with now may be a little bit different, but it will certainly be similar in spirit. So the first thing, of course, is to identify the intent. And I know my intent, my vision for this was clear from the moment I photographed it. And how I express that intent, of course, it could be a color photograph. It could be a black and white photograph. I know I want this to be a black and white photograph. I know I want it to feel elegant. I know I want it to feel contemplative, because the gesture for that sort of contemplative, the contemplation is already there. I know that I want to minimize some of the stuff like this bright hot spot over here and the brightness of the water, and I want to give this a real kind of deep kind of look. So the first thing I'm going to do, because I look at my histograms at the very beginning of this all is really totally fine. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff initially, but I'll keep that in mind for later. The first thing I want to do is I want to turn it to black and white, and I want to give it a fairly strong tone curve, medium contrast. All right. So, and the reason I'm starting here rather than starting in the basic panel is because those choices, going to black and white and then going and giving myself the tone curve I want, will affect those give me the broadest possible change. They kind of set the stage. Now I can kind of go in here and kind of fiddle. So you'll notice over here, and again, this I don't know that this is the exact treatment that the way I did the image the first time, but over here is very bright, and over here is very bright, and I kind of want to get rid of those. Now I could do a couple of things. I could darken them up, which I will probably do over here, but this one is actually can be fairly easily done with the clone tool. So I'm going to go over to the clone tool, and I'm going to set this, and now I'm going to just drag this until I find sort of an appropriate looking piece of tree. Now the edges on this are very hard, and I don't want the edges really hard, so I'm going to feather my selection. And when you show it again, now you can see that the clone job is much less obvious. And if you wanted to sort of move it around until you got something that looked a little more that didn't distract you with, you know, some of the hard edges, or some of a duplication of a recognizable pattern. If you take it from a place that's really close, you'll notice this piece here gets replicated here. So I generally try to kind of take it from a place that's a little bit further away and doesn't have anything totally recognizable. I will do the same thing there, and I don't need it to be really big. I just want to get rid of that one hot spot. And that's pretty good. I'm going to then darken this over here. And in some ways, this is my minimize distraction stage. So probably just try it with the adjustment brush and see if kind of darkening it down helps. And you want to pull the highlights down, because really it's actually the highlights that are offending over here. So just kind of pulling those down. I might even just kind of give it a little bit there. And if you want, you can also pull the clarity down a little bit, because that introduces sort of an unsharpness to the whole thing. And I see I missed a small spot up here that's going to drive me crazy later on. Sometimes Lightroom chooses things from very bizarre places. Okay, so the last one is down here, and I'm going to try my hand at just a big, sloppy, well-feathered clone, and that's actually not too bad. So I'm gonna leave it there, and then I'm going to darken down here at the bottom of the image. So I'm going to go here and just bring that up, and I'm going to keep it dark, and I'm going to lower the raise the contrast just to kind of darken it up a little. Make sure the highlights are down. You notice as I move this highlight slider, that's the one that really makes the difference, without plunging the shadows even deeper. So that's pretty good. Now I want to introduce some clarity to this image, because the image is so largely about texture. So I'm going to nudge it to around 34. My sweet spot for clarity is kind of around 30 for an image that I really want to be kind of textury. I find that if I go whole hog on it, it starts looking undesirable, let's say. All right, so now I'm going to focus on the bear, because I really want some attention brought to the bear himself or herself. I'm going to use the radial filter, and I'll show it to you. And what I'm doing here is raising the exposure and inverting the mask. So let me zoom out again and just show you. I find the radial filter actually a little weird to use, because what is inverted shouldn't be what's inverted. It should be this. Anyway, this is not inverted, and this is inverted. So inverted is the is brighter. Anyway, so I'm brightening him or her up. I might punch the clarity a little bit on her, and I will move things around and just see whether it's the shadows that I want. If you push your shadows too much, again, it starts to look kind of HDR-y and kind of fakey. And some people really like that. That is not my preference. So again, and I'm watching the histogram too, because I don't want to go here and go, oh yeah, that looks really great, only to find out later that I've completely blown out highlights. So always keep an eye on your histogram. Watch that you're not blowing your highlights out. I know I want it nice and bright, but I also don't want it too bright, and I don't want to defy the logic of the light. So again, I'll feather it out and make it fairly broad, in part so that, and I will not default to it being over here. I'll default to it being over here, because I want the light that's falling on the bear to fall on also what is closest to the bear, like the log. That's consistent with the light. This is not consistent. And now the log is a little bit lit up, which is where the bear is looking, and it kind of keeps the visual mass of the image where I want it to be. Now, before I go up here and use a radial filter and brighten this, which I suspect is what I will do, I want to show you something else. If you go down to the black and white panel, this is your black and white mix, and Lightroom gives you a default set of mixes for this. Remember that this is a color photograph. What you're looking at here is color. It's just got a black and white filter over top of it. This is where you control that filter. So for example, if you pull the greens way down, that's going to darken the greens. It's also going to get things kind of grainy and stuff. You got to be careful how far you push this. But if you lighten them, that's the effect on the greens. So this is, and remember, it's all the greens in the image get affected by this. So there are some tools that are really great, but they will affect things kind of globally. If you pushed this and really liked what you gained in one part but not another, that's a sign that actually maybe this is not the best tool. Maybe the better tool is to give this a nudge and then go into the adjustment brush and lighten up an area or add contrast or clarity or something that does a similar thing in terms of returning the visual mass of the image. So a little bit broader view here. Let's see if I can make it through this podcast type video without losing my mouse. So if you move the green slider, you get some brightness in the greens. Now, one of the things that's a little dangerous about this is, of course, you don't know exactly, are these leaves, if this is what I want to brighten, are these pine boughs, are they only green or do they have a significant amount of yellow in them? I'm not 100% sure. So that's where I would take this target adjustment tool and bring it over to the area that I want to affect, click on it, hold it down, and move the mouse down, move the mouse up, and now you see, in fact, it's not affecting the, if you look over here at the black and white mix, it's not affecting the yellow at all. It's affecting the green and a little bit of the aqua. So there's some blues in there. So a little bit up and a little bit down. That's just, if you do it this way, you don't separate the green from the aqua. If in fact there is some aqua in here, you don't want to separate them out and get posterizing or banding or just some weirdness. So that would be one tool that I could use. In an image where there is reds that you want to darken, you can use your reds. If you wanted to darken, say, the water and there was a significant amount of blue in the water, you could use your blues. So you never really know what you're going to get. So I just generally play with my sliders and see if it makes a significant change. Again, you may move something, ooh, I like that, only to find that what you gain over here that you really like, you lose over here. And so then you realize, actually, that's not what I want. What I want is darkness over here. And then you just go to a different tool, like the gradient filter, pull the gradient filter up, pull the exposure or the shadows down or the highlights or whatever, and you get the effect that you want without losing what you've gained over here. So that's the black and white mix, and I really encourage you to pull up a black and white image or pull up a color image, do a black and white conversion, just hit black and white, and then play with the mix and see how that can reassign some of the values. Again, be careful with it. Don't push anything too far. Don't strip anything, any of the data out and get things chunky. Keep an eye on it. If you're really unsure, then on those areas, zoom into 100% so you can see exactly what's going on with those. Because again, if you make them too bright, you can introduce a lot of noise, but you can also introduce other artifacting that you may not want. So just keep an eye on that. Now, there's a couple other things when I do that. I notice if I print this large, this is going to drive me absolutely crazy. The poor bear has a tiny little like pine needle or something on her face, and I'm going to just eliminate that. All right, now I want to pop. I've popped the bear with a radial filter. I thought perhaps using the channel conversions over here for black and white mix would do it, but I'm going to use a radial filter just to brighten this up. So I go back up to the radial filter, and I draw a nice big circle because this is the area that I want to lighten. It's nice and feathered, and now I'm going to again invert my mask and just brighten this area. Again, not too much. Highlights, see where that goes. And again, usually I move a couple of things around because, again, if you move like the highlights without moving the shadows, I'd rather move the shadows up a little and the highlights up a little for the most part than to push one really far and leave the other, because again, light has this way of, if you got strong highlights, you get potentially strong shadows, but if you got light bouncing around in there, you might actually have lighter shadows. So just keep an eye on it and ask yourself, am I dramatically changing the sort of the realism of the image? If that's what you're going for, you may be much more into sort of a dreamy fantasy kind of thing, and that's totally fine. That's part of your vision. You're going to express it the way you need to express it. So this would be kind of wrapping up on how I would do this photograph. The last thing that I would go into would be my detail. I would do the sharpening, hold down the key here. Oops, I got to give it some sharpening. Hold down the key, the option key, to look at my masking. And again, I don't want everything sharp, but I want the significant contours of the image sharp. And so I start playing with it until it gets to where I want it. That's about right. And then again, noise reduction. I pushed this image a little bit around, so I give it a little bit of noise reduction in both. And then I sometimes will just see if a vignette pushes the eye in a little bit. Maybe a little like that. Right? That would be the final touch. Other than before I kind of call it done, I'm going to just check my histogram, and you'll see there's a little tiny bit of black. You'll see some blue show up here, saying there's no detail in there. I don't actually mind that, but what I'm going to do is in my tone curve, I'm gonna sort of tap right here and pull it up. And when I do that, I'm going to lose. How far do I have to go here? There we go. I don't want to go too far. Let me just try this again. In fact, let me try here. There we go. If I pop that up just a hair, it doesn't change the aesthetics of the image, but it pulls in that black so that when I print, I'm not going to get areas of such density that I get pure ink with no paper, or conversely, if I had really blown highlights, even if the sun was blazing in this image, I would go up here to the top of the tone curve where the sun would be, and I would nudge that down a little until those blown highlights were back in. It doesn't give you detail back if they're really blown and gone, but it does make the image print a little bit nicer. And then one last thing that I'm going to do, just because it's caught my eye, and just quickly get rid of that bright hot spot there, and I would call that image done.